The air dates for this event are January 21st, 21st at 4 p.m., 23rd at 8 p.m., 24th at 5 p.m., and the 25th at 2 p.m. It's on Cable 12. That's the air dates for this event. There's also another way to get to that, and that's to Google Meet Your Legislators League, and it'll take you right to this site. They're also going to be posting, if you Google that, Meet Your Legislators League, that will also give you a little summary of what went on at some of these events, like an abbreviated version of minutes. So with that, we'd like to thank also our legislators, because as I always say, Meet Your Legislators event without legislators takes a lot of the oomph out of it. So we really appreciate those folks being here. We do have some refreshments and some coffee and some juice. Please help yourself to that. If you're so inclined, there's a couple of little areas up there to donate to help cover the cost of the coffee and the donuts and the juice. So if you're so inclined, we'd appreciate that. If you'd like to be notified of these particular events, you can sign up in the back of the room. There is a listserv back there, or a place to sign in, and we'll send you email notifications of that. We'll also make those lists available to the legislators so they can contact you about stuff if you don't mind. If you don't want any of that to happen, you don't have to sign up. If you have signed up in previous sessions and haven't been getting emails, notification of these events, let us know about that again, because that means that for some reason the email wasn't copied correctly, and there is no elbow room with email addresses. Either it's exactly right or you won't get it. So please make sure that that's the case. The format that we have for all of these events is essentially going to be that each speaker will get about 3 minutes to present their case, and the legislators will get a couple minutes each to respond. That's the challenge. That's where I kind of come in, because I've got my favorite little tool here, and I'm going to try to keep tabs on the folks. When you get kind of close, I'll hold up this sign. That means kind of wrap your speech up in 30 seconds. And you'll be able to do that. If you're not able to do that, I'll help you with that. And I'm going to try to do the same thing with some of the legislators. We'll keep going back and forth with brand new issues. So we'll pick a person, they'll identify themselves. You'll try to do in a couple of words what your issue is. I'll jot that down. You'll have your time then to present your case. The legislators will respond. Then I'll go to the other side of the room, and we'll just keep going back and forth and back and forth. Keep aware of the issues, because we will take only new issues until there aren't any more new issues. If there's time left and there's no new issues, we can revisit issues that have already been discussed. So that's kind of the plan. And so you're mostly on the honor system to help try to make that happen. But I'm here just in case you're not on the honor system. The other thing we'll need to do is just make sure that I want to welcome, again, the legislators, but especially we have a new person this time who is the first time up here, and that's Representative Gail Rican from District 77. That's why I put her right here, because sometimes these folks need my input, and I want to make sure that she knows kind of how this works. And so I'd like to indoctrinate her just a little bit. So Representative Rican. Your eyes are getting heavy. You can only hear the sound of my voice. She wasn't supposed to laugh at that. At any rate, okay, enough of that. With that, we'll get right into it. And so we'll start on this side of the room this time. And I see some hands. We see one in the middle back there. Yes. Microphone is going to be on its way to you. Please state your name and your issue in just a couple of words, and then we go ahead.
My name's Mary Bennett. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and it's not about physical therapy, so you can don't have to worry about that. It's really actually a clarification. It's probably more for Vanita Becker, Senator Becker, than anyone else, but property tax. I know we had a big reduction last year. Most people, certainly we did in Knight Township, and I know I've talked to a lot of people, and they think that this was a permanent reduction. And I know I have something from Anita that she sent out some time ago that said that Vanderburgh County was being reduced last year in 2008, but would actually go up again by something like 28%, I think, this year. And I have talked to innumerable people who are all counting on that reduction we saw last year staying. I sent a letter to the paper back in the fall after I saw an editorial I think it was written by the editor, saying, that property taxes were reduced and how wonderful it was and everything. And I think I just want clarification to make sure that I am right, because I keep telling people, don't count on that. I think it's going back up this year.
Thank you. Responses from the legislators. Senator Becker.
Our projections are, Mary, that we got a cut. Everybody got a cut. Most people did see their property taxes. I know mine went down tremendously. And so it was about 33% statewide, 32%, and ours did go down. And actually, mine went down more than 32%. But they are projected, according to Legislative Service Agency, to come back up 27% this year. Now, that's a projection. That's not, we don't know until all the figures are actually in, but that's their projection. Now, one thing about it is if your taxes went down, say 32% this past year, and they go back up 27%, it's not going to be the same percentage increase as if you were increasing that 27% on your previous tax bill. Okay, so it's still going to be a smaller increase, but it is going to be an increase. And so I think, in all fairness, that had to be said. But again, they're just projections, and what we saw this year with the circuit breakers is that local units of government did not lose the amount of money that was projected that they would lose by they were almost $1 million better off than was projected. So again, this is not an exact science, unfortunately, but that's what we are looking at. Yes.
Okay, there's one thing I did forget is that each of the legislators on your microphone, you'll have a little slide bar. When that goes toward the microphone itself, that means it's on. So just use that when it's on, and if you don't mind, slide it back down when it's off. Okay, other responses from legislators. Representative Avery.
Vanita's correct in that evaluation that the first year it went down a little bit more because we also used money from the previous session that was designed to reduce taxes that had not been spent, so that enabled that first year to be a little bit better as far as the reduction. And then, of course, the 1% that we in sales tax that was increased in order to pay for reducing property taxes that started a little bit early, started in April of that year, and we passed it. And we've also transferred many of the responsibilities that were local responsibilities to state government. For example, we now we'll pay 100% of the operating fund for education. We'll pick up the child welfare fund, hospital care for the indigent. There's a whole bunch of funds, juvenile court expenses, that were transferred to the state of Indiana. And that's one of the reasons the state of Indiana is going to have a lot of trouble this year, because we picked up a lot more responsibilities. And I doubt that we're going to see, because of the shortfall that we have, we're going to have trouble, I think, spending or paying for a lot of our responsibilities this year. And it's one of the difficulties we're going to have putting a budget together. And Suzanne and I will be on the Ways and Means Committee, and she'll get to experience this in a few days. And but anyhow, it's going to be a tough year because of the increased responsibility the state government has for paying local property taxes, or local bills that used to be paid for by property taxes.
Okay. Senator Dyke was next.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to see a big crowd here today, so it's nice to see everyone here. I'm sure everybody's got some issues, and that's why they're here. Otherwise, have about 2 or 3 people here. But anyway, Mary, Senator Becker is correct. We don't know what those number figures are. Of course, the property taxes did drop pretty dramatically for most people around the counties, in all the counties throughout the state, as a matter of fact. But we don't know the increased number next year. I don't know. Now, in Posey County, we have one heck of a problem going on. We have a mandated reassessment. Posey, Marion, and I believe Shelby counties were mandated reassessed. We haven't even got our tax bills out in Posey County from this past year. So everyone is borrowing money to survive. And it's just a mess because the schools are borrowing money, local government's starting to borrow money, and I don't know what we're going to do. So I do have a bill this year that I'm going to promote a little bit. It won't go anywhere. It'll melt. But it's ordering the state to pay all the finance charges incurred by this reassessment in Marion, Posey, and Shelby counties. So I wish we could get that because it's going to create a heck of a mess for the taxpayers, increase taxes for them. So,
Okay, thank you. Representative Crouch.
I think everyone has pretty well explained the issue. The only thing I'd like to point out is that, excuse me, your 09 bills are still projected to be less, excuse me, than your 07 bills. So while there will be an increase, it's projected that there will be an increase. It's also projected that that increase will still be less than what you paid in 07.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go now to the next issue, and that's going to be this side. I see the first hand I went up was the fellow in the middle in the black. Please state your name and briefly your issue.
Thank you very much. My name is Jack Schreiber, and I'm president of the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. And I'd like to draw attention. I left a packet for each of the representatives and a letter, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the proposed 50% cut in this specific budget. As I said, this letter is from the Arts Council Board of Directors and staff. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today, and thank you for dragging yourself out of bed on this chilly day. Notice that we define the not-for-profit arts as an industry. It employs 54,000 people statewide, more than twice the combined Indiana employment of Toyota, Eli Lilly, Delphi, and U.S. Steel. Equally important, that is the industry of cultural assets that largely define our quality of life in Indiana. Governor Mitch Daniel, in his State of the Union address Monday evening, said that with this pro-business policies he's implementing, Indiana is posed for eventual growth, and, quote, no more historians will write that we are backward and out of step. And we sincerely hope that's right, but we are concerned. In his proposed 2010-11 budget, the governor has called for a 50% reduction in the state's support of the arts, the line item budget's appropriation for the Indiana Arts Commission. And that seems contradictory to his goal for progressive image of growth in the state. Indiana has already ranks 37th nationally in the state per capita spending for the arts. At 63% capita, when the national average is $1.8 million, Governor Daniels, $1.18, the proposed cut to reduce the state support from $4 million to $2 million a year, that would drop us to a rip-roaring 48th place at 32 cents per citizen. Such a drastic slice in the state policies funding for the arts could not only jeopardize thousands of existing jobs, but could result in a significant reduction or disappearance of cultural assets that contribute to Indiana's attractiveness of new jobs. Study after study shows that this hard-nosed economic reason to invest in the arts and culture. States and communities that rank low in quality of life amenities also rank low in attractiveness and drawing other companies. The Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana represents multiple counties, including Gibson, Knox, Pike, Posey, Spencer, Vandenberg, and Warwick. Our communities are blessed with some of the most wonderful cultural assets: our Philharmonic Orchestra, galleries, civic theaters, dance theaters, art education programs, special children's programs, and their acclaimed Tales and Scales. These are the things supported by the state funding that would not be there. In essence, we would like for you to help us with this proposal and to rethink this thought.
Okay, thank you. Responses from legislators. Representative Crouch first, then Representative Avery.
Thank you, Jack. And I got up because I heard you were going to be here. First of all, I appreciate you being here and giving us that input, because it's important as we start this process of forming a budget that we hear from our constituents. And certainly the governor's proposal was a starting point. I don't think any of us would say today that that's what we're going to end up with. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I certainly will keep that in mind as we continue to move through the process. And we'll do everything we can to ensure that what we started with isn't what we're going to end with on April the 29th. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Avery was next.
This is the governor's recommendation, and it's, as Suzanne said, it's his recommendation. It's also the recommendation of the Indiana State Budget Committee, of which I'm a member. There's a 5-member budget committee, and it was recommended by a vote of 3-2. I was one of the 2 no votes, and I'll be I will work in the House Ways and Means Committee, where Democrats are in the majority, because the 2 no votes were both Democrats and the 3 yes votes are both Republicans, or all 3 Republicans. But we will work to restore funding for the arts in the House version of the budget. Then it will go to the Senate, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to convince our colleagues in the Senate not to fund the arts at that level. They also propose eliminating entirely the funding for public radio and public television. And with the cuts and the loss of revenues that we're already experiencing with public television, public radio, I don't know how they'll be able to stay afloat if the governor's recommendations prevail, but we will work to restore that also.
Thank you. We have Senator Dyke.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, the arts accounts for about 1,200 jobs in my district down here in Evansville, the downtown area. And it's very important for this area. I really believe that. It's important for people's lives, for the arts. Also, the public televisions, we're going to lose local programming. And it's shows like this and local shows of interest, government shows, that's what we're going to lose locally if we lose that budget for that public television.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
I'll try to be brief. This budget is just a beginning point, and we're not going to know the final figures on the budget until the end of April. And that way, hopefully, if there is a federal economic stimulus package, we can plug those figures into our budget as well. And we'll also know what our state revenues are doing. I mean, they're down, as all of you know, and I think, unfortunately, we're not at the end point of the revenues going down because we're seeing a lot of companies lay off people. Just this week, Cummins Diesel is laying off, I think, 600 more people. And there's another company in Indianapolis that's closing down. And so I think it's going to become more painful before it gets better, unfortunately. But we will not know what the final figures in the budget are until, like I said, the end of April. And hopefully we can restore not only some funding for the arts, but also for public television.
Thank you. Before we move over to the other side, I did forget to mention one thing that has come to my attention. We do have some students from U of E here, so we're always happy to see students expressing an interest, even though probably not 100% voluntarily, in your government. So we do appreciate you guys showing up, and hopefully you'll be excited about this and be involved in government, be involved in public policy. That's because you're going to have to inherit a bunch of this stuff. So whatever happens is not going to just happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen for you guys for a long, long time. So we appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. Now, we're over here on this side. We are down in the middle in the orange cap with the paper. Microphone's on its way. Please state your name, briefly your issue.
My name is Fred Cook. I'm the chairman of the Coalition of Inner City Neighborhoods, and my concern is, like last year, veteran. We're not even completed the first month of winter, and already there are numerous concerns about the December billings received by residents of the city. There's people on both sides of the Lord Expressway that have received utility bills between $500 and $900. These are 1-month billing cycles. I'm here to ask that if our coalition was to bring to you all a petition with 1,000 names or more on it to your next session here at the library, would you be willing to introduce a bill that would seek the election of the members of the Indiana Regulatory Commission instead of having them appointed? It seems that this is where the problem lies, and also seems the veteran has its members in their pockets since they're willing to approve the rate hikes every time this country seeks them. If it was voted on by the public, then maybe they would be more compassionate about the people that can't afford to pay these outrageous bills. In the last several months, there have been several fires around the city due to people trying to stay warm because they've had their utilities turned off. One of the fires was the cause of an old woman's death that had to run an extension cord across the street so that she could have heat. People shouldn't have to die trying to stay warm in the winter months. The reason they're using this year is that they stockpiled gas last year when the prices were higher and they had to charge these prices. So does this mean that since gas is selling low in the stock market this year, that they would lower the rates next year? This seems to be an ongoing thing every year. In the summer months, they hike the electric rates because people are using air conditioning, and in the winter months, they hike the gas rate. because people are using heat. They have complete control over the gas from the time it comes out of the ground to the time it reaches our home. They own 61% of the company that they purchase the gas from, which means they control the rate. They own the pipeline that the gas runs through, which we're charged the distribution charge for. And on top of this, we still have to pay $2 to pay the bill. Minimum wage earners don't have the luxury of complaining and then be able to pull out a checkbook and write a check for $900. Mr. Harold Miles, who lives on Powell Street, had a 40-day billing cycle last month and received a bill for $300. This month, he received a bill for a 20 days cycle, and the bill was over $700. Mrs. Anita Glover, that works every day from 8 to 5, received a bill for $637. What's so unusual about this is that they can't even read her meter because it's in her basement. Last year, this company grossed $88 billion from its companies located in Indiana, Ohio, and Alabama, which the latter two states were sued in for racketeering, fraud, and price fixing. In one of these states, they had to reimburse consumers more than $32 million for overcharging them.
Thank you. Time is up.
All right.
We have responses from legislators, please. Representative Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels, and I also am very glad to be here and see some friends, and I know folks are very, very concerned about the Vectren issue because it's not only just the increase that they're seeing, the cutoff, the charges to reinstate your gas and electric, those are exorbitant. I know there's a lot of concern, a lot of people hurting, and I asked that you all get me your names and addresses as well. Deregulation has been something that has been good for the state, but for Vectren. But in some ways, I think that it has caused some of these problems for us. I think that we need to have not only look at the issues of commissioners and how they are appointed or elected, but we need to look at this issue. We need to look at the issue of demand charges on government and commercial bills, and I would like to see that we would have a study committee for it. The problem with that, again, and maybe you can help me, my being new, is that doesn't happen right now. That happens in the summer when you have these study committees. So I would look to the expertise of others up here as to how to address this right away. But I really do feel so that the concern that you all have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other responses? Other legislators? Okay, Senator Dyke.
Well, this is a very important issue because I get calls probably every day right now on bills, energy bills, and it's astronomical actually. And I know a lot of you know more about this than I do probably, but and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but electric in Indiana is, I think, about 94% electric that is generated is from coal-fired power plants. And we have new regulations now for the state, and the construction costs of these and the operational costs of these have been passed along to the consumers, which is us. And there's no easy answer right now for that. It's going to take years to turn this around. Now, renewable energies are the way to go, I believe. We need to find some kind of tax credits to invest in these renewables. Biomethane, Bristol-Myers right now is going to take biomethane from the landfill and use it in their power plants to make steam over there. We need to find credits for local municipalities to use such ideas like this. Conservation, of course, is the number one. We need to find ways to conserve electric through insulation, building techniques, things of that nature. We talked about deregulation a little bit, and deregulation in most states where electric is deregulated, the costs have gone up. And I'm kind of looking, I think might have been some people here that called me. I talked to them in depth about this, but just about 2 or 3 years ago, we deregulated internet, communications, the cable and communications industries. Right now, we have a lot of competition in that area. What's going to happen in the future, I don't know. I think that was a good bill when it passed, but we're going to see in the next few years what's going to happen with those costs. Is one company going to buy a number of these out? So it's going to be interesting to see from that deregulation of the telecommunications industry what's going to happen or what would happen with electric industry.
Thank you. Other legislators? Senator Becker.
I guess one thing you have to keep in mind is that what Vectren did is they bought a lot of gas last year when it was high. And under the law, they are allowed, they do not make a profit off of that. They are allowed to pass on the increase that they paid. Now, supposedly when they pay less for gas and electric, then our bills should go down. But
They're not buying that.
well, I mean, that is the reality of it. It's just that if it doesn't go down, you're not going to see that decrease either. So they are not allowed to make a profit over the increase that they charge for gas. They are allowed to charge you what they actually paid for it when it was high. You know, I guess speculating, there was no way to know. They probably should have done a little less buying at that time to wait and see, but who knows? We were also, all of us, paying like $4.38 a gallon for gas, and we didn't really know that gasoline was going to go down to what it is either. So there's really no way to know that for sure, but they are allowed to pass that along.
Okay, thank you. Representative Avery.
Well, I'm honestly not sure what to say about this problem because I've been lobbied about this issue at home. Patty says, "What are you going to do about this?" And because our utility bill has gone up too, and we just have a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath home out in the country, and we think we're pretty careful about the insulation. We got one little area we need to work on, but I'm not certain to start with that electing them would do a great deal of good to elect the commissioners. But over the years, I've gotten so frustrated by the Utility Regulatory Commission and some of their decisions that I almost come to a point, well, it can't hurt, and so maybe that is one of the steps that could be made that might make them more responsive to the public. But over the years, I've not tended to want to do that, but it gets more frustrating every year. And this year, we're going to be hearing from a lot of people regarding their utility bills and their inability to pay these very large bills. If my little house has bills as high as they are, I'm sure that people living in older homes that have insulation problems and large families, they're going to have a real serious problem, and they're going to be unable to pay their bills, and it's going to be something we're going to have to address. I think. I just wish we had the kind of money that we need to address these issues. As has been said several times, we're having financial problems ourselves this year. And it's going to be very difficult for us to help people with utility bills as we've done so in the past. I don't think we can depend on the federal government to do everything. And there seems to be this attitude that we'll let the Obama administration take care of it, and Indiana will sit back and draw the benefits of it. But I don't think we can do that either. We have to wade in and help with some of these issues, and I'm just not sure how we're going to do it. But if you got more suggestions, please feel free to let us know, because it's going to be a session that won't end until April, and there'll be a lot of issues discussed, and this will certainly be one of them.
Thank you. Now we're ready to move to the next issue. We're going to be on this side of the room. First hand I saw up was right here in the aisleway. Microphone's right there. Please state your name and very briefly your issue before you get into it.
My name is Ed Butch. My issue is statewide smoking ban. Good morning. The issue today is a statewide smoking ban. I'm not here representing an organization. I'm just a concerned citizen. I have a packet for each of you that will show what other states have done about this major health issue. I did not provide in this information any health details because you all know the health issues and have plenty of information about that. I have taken my time to respond to my representative surveys, but I'm not very confident the survey answers will have much merit toward your vote. I know that there are many powerful and wealthy lobbyists knocking on your door representing their paid interests. I worked in an industrial environment for 42 years, and the state and federal government both required the employer to provide a safe workplace. I would like to know the difference between a manufacturing employer and a non-manufacturing employer in regards to providing a safe work environment for all employees. People need to work to support their families. Just because they don't have a union or any other organization fighting for their safety and health doesn't mean that the elected officials shouldn't protect them. I will close with this. Please protect workers from the proven negative health effects of secondhand smoke. If a tavern owner wants to allow smoking and that owner doesn't have any employees, then I say the owner can do as they wish. But if there's even one employee, there should be no smoking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Responses from legislators. Representative Crouch is first.
Thank you, Mr. Butch, and it's nice to meet you. We have actually exchanged many communications regarding this issue. And one of the things that I shared with Mr. Butch is that last year when there was a statewide smoking ban that came for a vote, it had so many exceptions that there may as well not have been a statewide smoking ban. So the important thing is to not allow the special interest groups to get themselves exempted out of a statewide smoking ban, and so that it treats every Hoosier equally. And that'll become the challenge in this session again, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Senator Becker was next.
Good morning, Ed. It's good to see you again. Appreciate your input as always. And I did put this question on my legislative survey, and I hope folks will return it because I do listen to what the people who send me here have to say, and that usually if I can get a response, I certainly am supportive of what their wishes are, especially in cases where it's a pretty cut and dried what the answer should be, or I mean what their opinion is. I think Representative Crouch is right. There is a bill in the Senate, but it's got so many loopholes in it that it probably wouldn't be a step forward. I talked with someone with the American Cancer Society that said that they really couldn't support it the way that it is, but she is going to talk to the author and see if they can get some changes made. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is to contact the governor's office. I talked with a legislator on Thursday evening who said that she had had a conversation with the governor and she really wasn't sure that he was supportive of a statewide smoking ban. So I think I certainly will keep an open mind and look at this very carefully should we get an opportunity to vote in the Senate on a statewide smoking ban. But if we're going to do something, we shouldn't allow loopholes so that everybody, and I just have to say that I think the county commissioners took a real step backward this week in what they did.
Other legislators, Senator Dyke, then Representative Avery.
Thank you. You're talking about these very wealthy lobbyists. I was talking to one of those lobbyists the other day, although he's not wealthy, and he lobbies for the tobacco industry. And he told me, I asked him what he felt about that and what was going to happen this year. He really feels there's going to be some kind of smoking ban this year statewide. He doesn't know what kind, but he really feels that way. Now, that being said, I'm against statewide. I think it ought to be a local issue. And I think if I own a tavern or establishment, I think I ought to be able to say, hey, I don't want smoking in there. And I think there have been a number of them here in Evansville that stopped smoking in their areas. But anyway, that's the way I feel about it, and I'll be open to anything you have to say.
Thank you. Representative Avery was next.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Ed. You still live in Newburgh area? You're not my constituent, but one time you were. But I will vote for a statewide smoking ban, and I'm hopeful that it's a very strong statewide smoking ban. And for one thing, my wife would beat me up. If I didn't, she's chairman of the American Cancer Society's Cancer Awareness Network, I believe, and she lobbies, or not lobbies, but she beats us up over that issue all the time. But I will vote for it. I'm hopeful that, as Vanita and Suzanne said, that it's a strong bill that does protect the public and protect worker rights in the workplace, because that's one of the big issues. We always hear, well, smokers or non-smokers don't have to go to those places that have smoking, but workers, if they want to work and if they want to support their families, they can't just up and leave and go to another place. We don't have that kind of marketplace anymore. So We do protect workers from other industrial pollutions, and that's a very serious a pollution that we should also protect workers from. So I'll vote for it.
Thank you. Next is Representative Rican.
Thank you. Let me say also that I am lobbied probably every time the family gets together. My sister-in-law, Catherine McGraw Engel, is sitting here, I think, with some of her students, and I do think it's an issue that we need to address statewide. I would support a ban. I do want to see what happens to some of the casinos and some of those issues, because there has been some studies, one that I received this last week, that documents their revenue being cut in half on certain tables. So it is a concern, because we do use those revenues in the state of Indiana. But I do support a statewide ban.
Thank you. We're moving on to the next issue. We're on this side. My goodness, we have lots of folks. Didn't really see who went up first. We'll take right there in the middle on the aisle. Please state your name and in a couple words your issue, and then we can get into the issue.
I'm Marilee Fowler. I'm with the Evansville Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I'm here in regards to the recommendation to cut the state tourism budget by 50%. Recently, the Association of Indiana Convention and Visitors Bureaus commissioned a study with Ball State University's Center for Business and Economic Research, and this study was conducted by economist Dr. Michael Hicks. The major finding from this study is that for every dollar invested in marketing our community or our state and local governments, primarily local, are receiving $15 in new tax revenue. We're already seeing a cut in this current budget by 20%. And as a result, at the end of this month, none of the state welcome centers will have staff to be able to answer questions and direct travelers as they come into Indiana. We are locally affected in the fact that we operate the Black River Welcome Center, and that we will be letting 3 staff members go. One of them had been there 15 years, another one had been there 10, so they are really good at what they do. So that's an immediate feel. And we can't do this in promoting the state without support of the state tourism office. And if the challenge is revenue needed, why does it make sense to cut the one industry that will return new sales tax revenues within the same year it is invested? And the wonderful point is a large portion of those come from non-residents of our state. Tourism investment returns new dollars faster than any other economic development engine. And by reducing the tourism office budget only by the average of the other state agencies, and I believe that recommendation is 8% compared to this 50%, valuable marketing efforts can be retained, returning 28 new state and local dollars for every dollar invested. This translates to $26 million in new revenues in 2007 from marketing that took place in that same year. So cutting the budget for tourism marketing is in reality reducing revenue for the state even more. So I ask you to reconsider that recommendation from 50% to a much lower recommendation comparable to the other agencies of 8%. Thank you.
Thank you. Responses from legislators. I have Representative Avery first, then Representative Crouch.
Thank you very, very much, Marilee. I mentioned earlier I voted against the governor's recommendations, and this is important to the state of Indiana. It's been proven that tourism is a big economic development tool to bring jobs in Indiana and employment and revenues for people that depend on that industry. And it's foolhardy to cut that kind of at that level. And it's also the fact that Indiana doesn't do a very good job to start with, and in promoting tourism and as an economic development tool. So it's one of numerous issues within the budget recommendations that I objected to, and I've been asked so many times, why did you vote against the governor's recommendations? And we're hearing just a few of them. But the governor has some major increase in areas, too. For example, he wants to spend $110 million more for prisons. He wants to build 2 new prisons, and we do have a serious problem in that regard, but that shouldn't be our priority, and that's his number one priority is prison construction. It's the only major area of increase, and not prison construction, but also operations of prisons. So I'm very concerned about this and many other issues, and it's one of the things that you can count on. At least members of my caucus will be supporting, and I think you're going to get support with both caucuses in the House, at least.
Thank you. Representative Crouch was next.
Thank you, Mayor Lee, and the local Convention and Visitors Bureau does a wonderful job, not only for Evansville, but for the surrounding area, and I thank you for your service. We mentioned before it's just a starting point, but I think we also have to recognize that the budget forecast was $900 million less revenues than it was in December of '07, so everyone is going to be affected. And we've been saying that we have asked locals to tighten their belts, and now we at the state are going to have to tighten our belts, and that's the political reality. How that belt is tightened will become what we will discuss over the next few months, and certainly I agree with Representative Avery. There's going to be not only a lot of changes, but there'll be bipartisan support for a lot of these organizations.
Thank you. Other legislators? Thank you. We'll move on to the next issue. We're on this side of the room now. I see right in the front. Lady is coming with a microphone to you. Please state your name and briefly your issue, and then we can get into it.
My name is Beverly Kelsey, and my issue is veteran.
We've already had a veteran we've talked about
but
before.
I wasn't given a chance to say Indianapolis kicked veteran out. It's time for Evansville to do the same.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving now to this side. I see in the back, not all the way to the back, right there, hands up, second from the aisle. Please state your name and in a couple of words your issue.
David Coker. I'd like to talk about the governor's suggestion to Barack Obama a couple months ago.
About
the Highway Trust Fund money.
Okay, thank you.
You may recall the press accounts of the National Governors Association meeting where Mitch Daniels made a suggestion to President Obama about foregoing the formula of the Federal Highway Trust Fund and certain regulatory potential constraints on projects that may be considered in this stimulus package that has been talked about for the past couple of months. As you probably all are very well aware, since 1956, there has been a disparity in the method by which Federal Highway Trust Fund monies are dispensed throughout the various states in this country, to where certain states like New Jersey and New York and California get a disproportionate share, and we end up getting about 92 cents for every dollar of federal taxes on motor fuels that are paid in this state returned to the state. And one of the suggestions that I made in a column that was published on December 18th was that both houses of the General Assembly could consider state of the body resolutions which would basically reinforce and support what the governor is saying. This might be a way where we could actually get more than what has traditionally been considered our fair share of infrastructure dollars if we all work together in a bipartisan fashion. And I have to tell you, I'm already disappointed by some of the press accounts of what I've heard being reported as to what's going on up there regarding this stimulus package that we want to craft at the state level. Instead, I think we ought to be taking steps to right an age-old wrong that we've all been very well aware of for years. I had an opportunity to talk with Representative Brad Ellsworth 2 weeks ago, and he is going to circulate a Dear Colleague letter to all 435 House members regarding this issue. And I was wondering if you could potentially appeal to the leadership in both houses to consider such resolutions supporting the governor.
Thank you. Responses from legislators. Representative Crouch first.
You know, do you know, David, because I don't, or maybe one of the legislators know, how that federal funding formula is figured to where Indiana is a donor state instead of a state?
It was set up in 1956 when the Federal Highway Trust Fund was first established. I used to write about this all the time when I lived in Washington, and it amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars, literally hundreds of millions of dollars that we have paid into this fund over the last 40-some-odd years, almost 50 years, 52 years, and we routinely get 92 cents for every dollar that we send to Washington. And this is an opportunity where the legislature, in a bipartisan fashion, could work together to potentially support a Republican governor that is making a request of our new Democratic administration.
And so your request is that the federal road funding formula be changed in order to...
No, that's not what I'm saying. Barack Obama can dispense with this new money in any way that he wants. He doesn't have to necessarily file, because it's not earmarked as Federal Highway Trust Fund money. It's money we're going to borrow from our children. So what, you know, it's a moot point. It's not, the money that they're talking about for infrastructure will not be money that came from federal taxes, federal highway taxes on motor vehicles. It's probably other money that they're going to borrow. So that's the issue. And we could potentially get hundreds of millions of dollars. And it might, you know, we might be able to finish some projects that we've been talking about my entire life. Or make improvements to secondary roads with some of this money as well.
Good.
You know, that's something that's to be determined between legislature and the administration to do that. But read my column and take it back to the leadership and see if they would be willing to do something like that. As I said, Brad Ellsworth has already said he's going to send out a dear colleague letter to his
Okay.
And the suggestion that Ed Rendell, the governor of Pennsylvania, asked Governor Daniels to formalize his comments in the form of a letter, which will also be circulated to all the governors in the United States as well.
Okay. Representative Avery.
I recall you sent me a copy of this letter several days ago, which I read, and there were a couple concerns I had about the letter. As I recall, this is not necessarily unique to the governor's recommendation. That is that most governors around the nation are suggesting similar things. In fact, the Obama administration did not say that it would that the incentive money would all go through the local road and street account or the state highway account. One of the concerns that there is a lot of discussion taking place, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. Many people don't want to just give it to the governor and let the governor spend it as the governor wants to spend it. And that's one concern that I think local government officials have about the incentive money that will come to the state, and it will be coming. At least I'm hoping that we'll get money to do additional road work, and it's just a matter of, I think, input of not just the governor, but also of local officials and also legislators in our budgetary process. And we fight about that about every 2 years. And I think there's already been somewhat of a battle, a small skirmish that took place the other night on this particular subject matter. But there's going to be a lot of discussion of it, and we will pass a bill in a bipartisan way. We always do. It has to be bipartisan. Democrats control the House, Republicans can control the Senate. So it will be a bipartisan bill.
Thank you. Senator Dyke.
You know, David, this will probably surprise you, but I agree with you. And it'll really surprise you, I agree with the governor. I would back that effort. There's no doubt about it. We need to get more money into the state. I agree with Dennis Avery, though, that we need some type of oversight over all this money that might be coming in. So we need to make sure we have some kind of oversight set in place for that.
Thank you. Other responses from legislators? Thank you. We'll move on to another issue. We're on this side of the room again. Aisleway came up first. Microphone's right there. Please state your name and in a couple of words your issue, and then we can get into your issue.
Good morning. My name is Dan Hartz, and my issue is funding for children, not only in Vanderbilt County but across the state. I am a taxpayer here in Vanderbilt County, and I also represent the teachers in Vanderbilt County. The state and federal governments have, over the past several years, provided accountability means for students and teachers to improve scores, and that I would wholeheartedly support, and I think that's a move in the right direction. As we know, dollars flow into schools of high poverty through federal grants, Title I grants, et cetera, and those dollars help students increase the kinds of experiences that they need to be successful, not only in school but as taxpayers in the future. Vanderbilt County schools, there are several schools who have not met the bar according to No Child Left Behind, as we all know. But I think there's a bigger picture or a deeper picture there. Those schools have been improving. They have made significant improvement. The difference is, or the issue is, that the bar of No Child Left Behind, as you know, continues to go up to a point where I believe it's in 2014. Every child, regardless of the things that the difficulties in their lives, have to be at that bar, which is at 100% measurable accountability. Again, no problem with that. The issue is that those dollars that are mandated to be spent in ways that are not directly related to the students in the classroom are now, because the scores are lower than the state is mandating and the federal government is mandating, those dollars are being spent away from the classroom. The state is mandating, the feds are mandating the establishment of teams of people to come in and tell folks how to do things that are not even teachers. And so I understand this kind of bleeds into the federal side, but also it also does impact the state. The issue, and my point here is, excuse me, I'm going to roll my page, is that as the funding sources for children in schools have been shifted from a stable form of funding, property tax. I understand. I'm a property tax payer too. I understand all that. I pay my veteran bill of $800. I understand that. The issue is, now that the state has moved that funding source to an unstable form of income, sales tax, fewer dollars are there to support exactly what the expectations are, improvement in scores. It is impossible to continue to provide improvement if the dollars aren't there. Flat funding means a cut. Schools pay veteran bills too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. You must have timed that. It was absolutely perfect timing. Thank you. Responses from legislators, please. Representative Crouch is first, then Representative Rican.
Thank you, Dan. And again, I will just reiterate that this is a starting point. This budget is. I think these legislators, at least in southwestern Indiana, have demonstrated that commitment to public education. But quite honestly, where a lot of states are cutting K through 12 funding, while you kind of interpret this flatlining as a cut, there are many, many states that have already cut public education, and I don't think any of us would be supportive of that.
Thank you. Next is Representative Rican, then Senators Dyke and Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz, and I truly we are committed to public education. I think one of the disturbing parts of the proposal is that we do not have our kindergarten fully funded, and we need to continue working toward that, and also early childhood education. So I know we'll all be working together in the best interest of the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dyke, then Senator Becker.
You know, Dan, in the governor's budget, he's looking to fund prisons with $100 million more. And we're still bringing in prisoners from California. Now, I can't figure that out. It seems like it's just the opposite of what we need to be doing. You know, we need to be investing in children and early childhood education. Now, my concern with the state taking over these funds, like you mentioned, is they're going to have control over these funds in the future. So I look in the future, they're going to have more and more control of these, and it's going to be bad news for local schools. I hope I'm wrong, but I have a feeling, a bad feeling in my stomach about that. So, like you mentioned also, flatline in funding is a reduction. Just with salaries, teachers' contracts, health insurance increases, and of course transportation cost and to heat and cool schools and for electric. So it's going to be tough for the schools, no doubt about it.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
Thank you, Dan, for your input as always. I think I know that the feds are, they're in the process of, I guess, deciding whether or not to reauthorize No Child Left Behind. And one of the big problems has been from the beginning that the federal requirements have not been funded adequately. And so, they put a lot of requirements on states without the money to back up those requirements, and then the state puts those requirements on locals without really adequate funding to back those up. And I do share some of the concerns that have been raised, in particular by Senator Dyke, as far as what will happen in the future. I'm very concerned that we not lose local control of our schools. And that concerns me when the state now has 100% of the operating. But in all fairness, they previously still already had 85% of the operating, and we still have local control. So I think there will be a real push against doing anything that diminishes local control. And we do have a school trust fund, so to speak, for revenues that have been set aside just in the event that revenues are lower, so that we can, because there was a concern last year. So hopefully we can do an adequate job. I don't think with the economy that we're going to do what we should be doing, because as you indicated, costs are rising without money to protect those increases or to pay for those increases. But I certainly think that education is the core of our democracy, so we have to do our very best to fund it adequately.
Thank you. Next is Representative Avery.
Thank you, Jim. There are a number of concerns that were expressed regarding this issue. The governor says he's putting $129 million more dollars into K through 12 education, but that's really not true, because 85 million of that is mandatory pensions, that pension increases that occurs every year. That's 85 million of it. And then he's cut 35. Then it's really a total of 44 when you count the 35 million that he's cut in entitlement programs, and we've heard some entitlement programs discussed already this evening, but he's cut this morning, 35 million in entitlement programs, so it's really 44 million. And that seems like a lot of money, but it's really not much money when you consider that education is over half of our budget anymore. But it will be, there'll be a lot of discussion that will occur, as has been repeatedly said. This is a start, but we will work to make sure that our most important responsibility is the adequate funding of education in the state of Indiana, and that the governor supported legislation last year that passed overwhelmingly. That was House Bill 1001. That said, we will take over 100% of the cost and 100% of the responsibility of funding education, at least the operations budget. And so part of that is the 100% of the responsibility, and we got to live up to that responsibility by adequately funding education. So the House, I think we will seriously take that responsibility. And by the way, one of the local controls that the governor is already saying is that we're going to, if you have less than 2,000 students, you got to merge with an adjoining school district. And I think that's a good idea if that school corporation is doing a poor job of educating kids. But if they're doing a good job, why in the world would you want to force them into the largest school corporations? Some of our worst school corporations in Indiana are those very largest ones that are not doing a very good job. And so I don't see much wrong with small schools. But anyhow, I could go on and on about this. Probably better shut up.
No, you can't go on and on.
Okay.
Thank you for trying, though.
I could.
We are filming this, and we're going to take about a half a second while we switch tapes. And it's simple to do that. If they're a senator, you put in the address an S, then their district number, then @in.gov. If they're a representative, you put H, then their district number, then AI, or then Indiana.gov. That's an easy way to do that. You can also do that by phone. If you want to telephone a senator to get in there, all you have to do is call. It's an 800 free toll-free number. So it's 1-800-382-9467. That is the number for the Senate. And I actually forgot the number for the House. It's an 800 number also for the House. 9841. Okay. The last four numbers for the House would be 9841. So it's 1-800-382-9841 for the House. So that's the way to phone. You'll get the desk, and all you have to do is state who you want to talk to, and they'll send them to their particular office. Now, remember, you really weren't supposed to get up and walk around too much.
We have. So this is the one with the one of them, and the other one's 8.5 by 11, but it counts to the back table. Thank you.
Okay. I might want to mention also that if you do want to contact your legislators, you can always write them and suggest that anytime someone has an issue here, it's nice to bring that issue at least to half a page or something in writing so they have something written to take away from them. Legislators also always have newsletters, and you can sign up for their newsletters electronically. So, and they also send out surveys that way. So that's another way for you to vote all the time. Okay, we're starting to get settled back in. We are going to move to this side of the room, and I see two hands up here, but the first one I saw was in the very front row, and the microphone is on its way to you. I don't think you put your hand down yet, but please state your name and your issue briefly, and then we'll get into your issue.
My name is Bob Mills, Child Care. The Perry Preschool Study and numerous smaller studies have confirmed that for every tax dollar spent on quality child care programs, there's an economic return of $16.14 because of crime savings, welfare savings, education savings, and increased tax revenue from higher personal incomes. Children that attend high-quality programs are less likely to need remedial education and more likely to graduate from high school. They have significantly higher test scores.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Is this about funding for children?
This is for early childhood care, which is different from high schools and schools. It's a completely different issue for people that understand early childhood.
Okay.
They have significantly fewer births out of wedlock if they attend quality child care, lower contact with social services, fewer divorces, a higher literacy rate, significantly higher lifetime learnings, and significantly fewer arrests than other children. Indiana is one of only 7 states that do not fund early childhood education as a line item. 12 states put more than $100 million annually into early childhood. Our neighbor Illinois puts $338 million in. Michigan puts $103, Kentucky $75 million, and Ohio $36 million. Bottom line, if Indiana would fund early education, we would solve many of the budgeting problems and would not need as many prisons. So what does our governor want to do? He wants to build prisons. This is the same short-sightedness that got us 10 years of road building for selling our highway for 75 years. I'm extremely pleased to see that Senator Becker and Dyke have co-authored a concurrent resolution to study the funding of early childhood. That's great. I'm also happy to see that Representative Krause has co-authored House Bill 1025, thank you, which is a tax credit for low-income parents. There's some other bills that could use your support. Senate Bill 203, that requires child care ministries to report children that are injured. House Bill 1478 creates a commission to study early childhood education. Senate Bill 74 requires the Division of Family Resource to adopt rules to protect young children from lead poisoning. I hope to see the rest of you contributing to these bills, and because young children need your help. You have the power to make children's lives better and change their future in Indiana.
Thank you. Responses from legislators. Thank you. Senator Becker, then Senator Dyke.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate your input as always. And we do have a resolution in the Senate, as you indicated. I have talked to Senator Lubbers. Her one concern was that our original language would have referred this to Child Care Coordinating Board, and she felt like it really should go to Education Matters, and we have changed that, and I think we will get a hearing. And I appreciate your statistics on the dollars going in from other states. I suspect Illinois is going to see a big cut in all their fundings. As you may know, they're facing an enormous deficit this year, among many other problems. But so I do think Indiana needs to step up to the plate, and I agree that if we would fund early childhood education and fully fund all-day kindergarten, we would have less need for prisons. But let me do say something about the issue of prisons, folks. Would you rather these prisoners be turned out on the streets, or would you rather build new prisons so that your neighborhoods are safer? I mean, I think that's not an option that the governor chooses. It's an option that he has to do with, we convict people every day of something. And you have to have prisoners, you have to have places for them to go. And we have community corrections. We have less, a lot of our folks on first offenses are being monitored at home, but we do not want to turn people loose from prisons either that need to be there for very serious crimes. So it's a no-win situation, but I agree with those of you who have said if we would put more money into early education and all-day kindergarten, in the future, we would have less of a need to build more prisons. And one thing I do want to make sure that those of you that may not live in my district, but you would like to return a questionnaire, if someone in my district didn't get a questionnaire with a survey, there's some in the back, as well as just some handouts on some of the issues and information as well.
Thank you. Senator Dyke.
Senator Becker, I want one of those surveys.
Actually, Senator Dyke, do you live on Carson Road?
Yes.
Somehow this week in the legislature, I got a letter back from you. It said return for wrong address.
Yeah, I changed my house number just for you.
And
Well, I want to thank Mr. Hafer. I want to thank you for coming up and testifying this past summer to try to get this resolution moving. And Bob, I want to thank you for your persistence in early childhood education. And this concurrent resolution now is not 4, it's 10. It was changed because we had to redirect the study committee on that. So it's SCR 10 now. But you brought up an issue about childhood safety also. And I think, we kind of silo early childhood education or child care into different childhood ministries and homes and everything else. And I think safety should be the same no matter where those kids are. And so I think it's important for safety to be a number one priority for those children. But I know that Mr. Hafer and Bob, you probably want to come testify when we get that hearing also. So we'll keep you informed on that.
Thank you. Representative Avery was next, then Representative Crouch.
The bills that you mentioned sound like good ideas. I have no problem with any of them. I'll support them. Of course, based on what might be there, and I might have another concern later. But for what you said, I have no problem with those. But a couple of the comments. The issue of prisons, for example, I've commented a couple times about it. But the governor is calling for, I believe, $110 million in new money and the construction of 2 new prisons. And one of the reasons is that we. At this point, we are adding 1,000 new people to the prison systems every year. And they are serving shorter periods of time, but even though we are, every year as legislators, are adding penalties and creating new crimes. And I heard someone say one time that you can't be a fiscal conservative and a law and order person at the same time, because prisons cost money. And so as a legislature, we're going to have to be more careful with the constant adding on to the penalties for prisons for certain crimes, some of which are not even that serious. But one of the biggest concerns I have about the prison money, the additional $110 million in the 2 new prisons, is that at a time when we're wanting to be fiscally conservative and cut unnecessary programs. We're seeing this kind of cost, but Vanita's right. We don't want dangerous people in our community. However, we're cutting the community corrections program at the same time, and that's what keeps the offenders that do not commit serious crimes, but small crimes in the community near their families, where they can continue working and support their families, and perhaps even pay the people back that they damaged. And we have those programs in Evansville, but when we cut those programs and build prisons, it just doesn't make sense. And we can save money and do by changing our attitude as a legislature and also as an executive administrative branch of government. And it all makes sense, but sometimes we don't do the things that make sense.
Thank you. Representative Crouch.
Thank you, Bob. The bill that Representative Day asked me to co-author to provide income or to provide tax credits for low-income individuals for daycare, he mentioned that it probably will not go anywhere this year, simply because there's a $10 million fiscal impact to that bill, and with with all the constraints that we have on the budget, it's more than not likely that bill probably won't move. However, it's important to keep those issues in front of the legislature so that when the economy does turn, that they're familiar with them and realize the importance of them, and hopefully will act upon them. But I did want to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Reekin.
The idea of tax credits and helping out families is extremely important, and I continue the tradition of Phil Hoy, who believes, and as I believe very strongly, in free textbooks. I have a bill there. It probably won't be heard, I'm sure, because of the situation we're in, but I agree with Representative Crouch. We need to make those issues on the front burner at all times.
Thank you. Move on to the next issue. We're on this side of the room now. So the first hand go up way in the back. Microphone is on its way to you. As soon as it arrives, please state your name. Very briefly, your issue, and then we'll get into your issue.
Hi, I'm Catherine Engel, and I'm interested in clean air, both inside and smoke-free workplaces, but also concerned about our contract with local EPA with the IDEM. And perhaps Senator Dye could speak to that issue and tell us the status of the legislation that is introduced to help renew those contracts. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Responses from legislators, please. Senator Dykes first, then Representative Avery.
Well, as you know, this federal money comes to the state, and it goes to, I think we have 6 different EPAs, local EPAs. I think we have Evansville, Terre Haute, Anderson, Gary, and Hammond, I believe. I believe that's it. And Evansville has always done a great job. And Donna Bergman is back there in the back. But I want to toot your horn a little bit, but it's fabulous. You know, people who are worried about the air in Evansville area should be concerned about this. But they work with the industry, they work with environmentalists, they work with anybody who has complaints, and they're there to check on it within the next day. Now, what they're going to do, or what they've already done, I guess, here in Evansville, is they cut the funding about 40% for the locals here in Evansville. And that really concerns me, because what they want to do, I think our closest office in Petersburg, is that correct, Donna? They're in Petersburg. Now, I don't know if they're really going to be concerned about Evansville with these issues. I was able to get everyone from those local EPA areas on this bill with me. And will it go anywhere? Probably not. I'll be honest with you. I've already talked to Senator Gard about this, and I've also talked to Scott McNally, the assistant with IDEM, about this, and it doesn't look too good, to be honest with you. You know, I'll just be up front. But there are some other resolutions. I think there's another resolution, another bill possibly, to try to help the situation. But I would be very concerned, just like you are, about our local air now, that nobody's going to be there to monitor it, nobody here locally to help industry and the citizens in our area.
Thank you. Next was Representative Avery.
I'm not as sure that there's a great deal we can do to mandate who will get a contract. That's a part of the executive prerogative, and there are consequences to elections, and I'm afraid that we made the wrong decision last year. But and that this administration will do the contracts with whoever they want to do the contracts with but there are a lot of problems that with this budget again, going into the budget again. For example, not just the cuts that you mentioned, but for example, recycling programs. It's my understanding that that's been zeroed out. There'll be no. They're not going to have recycling grants to local communities to promote recycling in this budget. As I said, this is the starting point, as Vanita and Susanna both said too, and Bob and others. But that's been eliminated too, and I think those are the kind of programs that we ought to be funding. We had trouble citing landfills, and we'll be. And if we don't have recycling programs, why it's going to be very, very difficult for us to continue that program, especially with the caps on property tax issues and the problems that local communities are going to have in that regard. But I think that we'll restore that. And there's so many problems that if we were to go all day long, that every few minutes we'd come up with another problem in the proposed budget. But that's a very serious issue. That and the concern that I have about the state monitoring of our pollution, because I don't think they do a very good job in IDEM of doing much of anything. And but we got to monitor the situation and hopefully make sure there's adequate funding available for the programs that are necessary. And because what has not been mentioned is we do, at the end of this biennium, as bad as it is, we'll still have close to $1.3 billion in surplus. And that's with a B. So we're not broke, and we'll be okay in the end, but we need to spend money where it's needed and eliminate waste. And the programs that we've discussed today, I don't think is waste.
Thank you. Other legislators? Senator Becker.
I appreciate your comments, Kathy, and I appreciate Donna being here. And Senator Dygan, I did send, I know he's talked with IDEM, but we did send a letter in December asking for answers to some of the questions that have been raised about the contracts and about how we're going to fill the gap at the local level. And to date, unfortunately, we haven't received a response. I did get one response maybe right before Christmas saying that they would look into it and they would get back with me. So I really don't think there's anything we can do because it is really an executive decision. And it's just one of those things that in tight economies, I guess that's just where the governor has chosen to make a change. I am hopeful. I know that Mayor Weinzappel feels like this is a very important program, and I know he's looking at other options with the potential to fund at least part of those cuts.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the next issue. We're on this side again. I saw this lady over here on the end. Microphone is on its way to you. When it arrives, please state your name, real briefly your issue, and then we'll get into your issue.
My name is Jenny Shaver, and I appreciate the chance to be here today to talk about this issue. I'm a mom of 5, and I'm also a chapter leader for a nonprofit organization, Evansville Birth Network, which promotes evidence-based maternity care. I'm here to talk about Bill SB 508, authored by Senator Dillon. This bill is for midwifery licensure for certified professional midwives. This bill will protect consumers who choose to have their babies at home. Consumers will continue to have their babies at home. The question is, are they going to do it unassisted? Are they going to do it with a granny midwife, or are they going to do it with a certified professional midwife who is accountable to the state and a licensing board? The legislator's job is to protect the public, and CPMs have excellent outcomes. And I keep on hearing talk about the financial crisis that we're in. The financial benefit of CPMs would benefit childbearing families as well as non-childbearing families. And so I believe that this issue is important, and many other states have legalized and licensed CPMs. Michigan, Wisconsin, Missouri just this past year, and Indiana there have been those who would seek to legalize and licensure CPMs for the past 10 years. And we're really hoping that this year would be the year, in light of the financial climate as well as the safety of the consumers, that our bill would be passed and protect the consumers as well as hold these healthcare professionals accountable to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Responses from legislators, please. Representative Crouch first.
Thank you, Jennifer. There was a kind of a hearing on this, not a committee hearing, but back, I think, about 2 years ago, and Representative Peggy Welch from Bloomington, who is a nurse, kind of pulled together the affected parties, and there was a discussion on it. Nothing really ever happened, but I would suspect the fact that Representative or Senator Dillon, who is a doctor, is authoring this bill, probably will lend a lot of credibility to it because he is a doctor. And I know that a lot of the concerns back 2 years ago came from the Indiana State Medical Association. So perhaps that's encouraging for the outcome of the bill this year.
Thank you. Senator Becker is next, then Representative Regan.
Senator Dillon is a dermatologist. Just wanted to clarify that. He's not a doctor. He's a dermatologist. But he, he does have medical background, and he's very good, and he's well respected. So I think I just wanted to clarify that he's not a physician. He's a dermatologist. But I do think that the bill probably stands a fairly good chance of something happening this year. I have talked with some of members of your association in Indianapolis, and I think his concern, Doc Dillon's concern, and we do call him Doc because he has medical training. I mean, he's really just a different kind of doctor. He's a doctor of dermatology, but his concern, and we're going to kind of wait and see, and I haven't seen his bill draft. His concern is that you have safeguards for women that have difficult births, and that a medical doctor is available in case of emergencies. And so I haven't seen the language yet. I certainly will keep an open mind on it. And if it gets a hearing, we'll certainly see if there's ways to do it. I suspect in the past the Indiana State Medical Association has been very adamantly opposed to this piece of legislation for medical concerns that have been raised. I have a former sister-in-law. She's deceased now, but she had all of her kids at home, so with healthy outcomes. But we just want to make sure that there are protections in the bill. And I think, while I haven't seen the language, that the lobbyist for midwifery has indicated that that's their goal as well.
Thank you. Representative Regan next, then Representative Avery.
Thank you, and I certainly support the concept. Excuse me, I think that the more friendly environment is exactly what we want, and I support that. My father and my brother were both OBGYNs. I think that they were, my father was very much a part of those kinds of progressive policies that were friendly to mom and baby, and I think this is one of them. I would like to know more, and I'd be happy to support when it comes to the House.
Thank you. Representative Avery.
Thank you very much. I think, in fact, I know I have. I've supported a similar bill in the past that Representative Welch authored in the House. But I have some concerns. I've recently spoken to a neonatologist, and they're not dermatologists. She's a neonatologist, and she recently took care of a mother whose child died during one of these procedures, in-home births. And I think all of us want to make sure that there is sufficient backup to make sure that if there's a problem, that someone is there to assist in the birth, a professional that's trained to deal with those issues. And also we want to make sure, obviously, that there is some sufficient training to care for the child and the mother in these when they do this type of work. But those are the kind of safeguards, I think, once they're there, why I think that most of us would be willing to support that legislation. It passed. I'm not sure it actually passed the House, but it was debated in the House, and it might have actually failed. With the bill in the House and the Senate, with the interest in this issue, as I said, I'm already getting phone calls from people that are very concerned about this, but I'll look at it very seriously and see what we can do.
Thank you. We're about ready to move to the next issue. I'm going to kibitz for just a second because we talked about a specific bill. If you're following any particular bill, don't assume that the introduced version stays the same. Almost every single bill that's been introduced ever since the beginning of time has changed from the time it was introduced to the time it's passed. And it could be almost the exact opposite. So if you're following something, follow it all the way. With that, we'll move to this side of the room now. I see a hand right in the middle with a sweater. About 30 in or so. Yes. Microphone's on its way. When it gets to you, please state your name. Very briefly, your issue.
Charles E. Taylor, House Bill 1656. Voted out of the House Roads and Transportation 7-5 along political lines. Frankly, I'm tired of votes along political lines, and I hope we start getting some along common sense lines for a change.
And 1656 is what?
Going to Ways and Means, 1656.
What is that bill?
It's the
what does it do?
Terry Austin's bill, Terry Austin from
what?
Henderson, concerning a stimulus package or highway package. I never did get the exact title of the thing. They didn't give it one, except the bill to nowhere. It's the Ways and Means Committee, and so I'm addressing this to Avery and Crouch. I would suggest you oppose this bill because the way I read it, it will stop I-69 with the current construction, and we will have 2 miles of DD interstate, dumb Democrat interstate, so we don't need that on our legacy. It will also take $245 million from the Department of Transportation and transfer it to cities and towns and counties, which they should raise their own street repair and so forth revenue. We don't need that much from the NDOT road. It will cause us to lose $690 million federal funds, again, according to the paper. So I would very seriously suggest you oppose this bill. But as you suggested, it will change. And I hope it does.
It's also not a good idea, strategy-wise, to insult somebody and then ask them to do something for them. That's not good strategy. Responses from legislators.
Thank you.
Representative Crouch, then Representative Avery.
I would oppose the bill as it is because what that bill does is the road funding that is currently in place, and we have one of the few states in the country that has a fully funded 10-year road project. Any project that does not have a construction contract award, or any road project that does not have a construction contract awarded by July 1 of this year would come off, the funding would be removed off the list, and it would go to projects that would be on the list after 2025, as I understand it. It also would jeopardize the $700 million funding for I-69, and so I would be opposed to that. Having said that, and would vote against it. Having said that, I was asked by a reporter whether this was really serious, and I would hope not, but in the process of trying to get, when everybody trying to get what they want in that final budget, a lot of bills and a lot of ideas are put out there for bargaining chips for later in the process. I am hopeful that this is one of those, that there is not any real serious commitment to making sure that this takes place, and I would vote against it.
Thank you. Representative Avery next, then Representative Regan.
As you indicated, it came out of Roads and Transportation Committee, and it will be recommitted to Ways and Means Committee. At least that's the assumption, because of the significant fiscal impact. First of all, there are a number of things you touched on, let's start with, I was very disappointed in the legislation because I don't think it was handled well for one thing, the public didn't know this was happening because they amended another bill to do this, and I don't think it's well drafted or well crafted. However, the subject matter is very important. The subject matter is to get Indiana off. We're sitting on our hands right now, and we're not doing anything about creating jobs. And that's the goal, is to create jobs in roads and transportation. And the other thing is to help local government maintain its roads and build the roads that they need, cities and counties. And we don't basically say you go earn your own money. We have a roads and transportation fund that funds things out of gas tax, but that's those numbers are down, and it's very common that the state help. For example, it will help local government build roads and streets. We did it several years ago out of the gaming and the lottery monies, and we put a couple $100 million in for 2 different bienniums for each for those programs, and there's no money left in those. We've used those all for tax reductions, or not all of it, but much of it, and so the concept is laudatory, except I think it doesn't. First of all, another thing, it does not stop I-69. That's Carl Browning, who made some unfortunate comments at the microphone, things like, you don't have a right to spend money that you didn't vote for. You know what? That's why we have elections, and elections, this recent election, elected a legislature to vote on these issues, and Carl Browning is way out of line and way off base in suggesting that he's with NDOT, or head of NDOT. But there are a lot of issues that we need to address, but I don't think this is the appropriate way of addressing it, and we will, if it comes to Ways and Means Committee, I believe it'll it'll have a lot of difficulty passing, and I don't think any of the local legislators even were aware that this was happening, because none of us are on Roads and Transportation Committee, and but 2 of us are on Ways and Means, and we'll take it up when it comes to Ways and Means. And as has been said repeatedly, this is step 1 in a session that will have a lot of steps.
Thank you, Representative Rican, then Senator Dyke.
Thank you, and I think we're all very concerned about it, and I just heard about it from Dennis yesterday morning, and was able to talk with the attorneys that drafted it, and also the attorney that did the fiscal impact. In talking, and also one of the gentlemen that actually testified, I understand the background. I understand getting people to work. I understand this is extremely important. I, concur here. This isn't the final bill, and there is a question as to whether or not I-69 is really impacted by this bill. That hasn't been determined, but I will say that I have found no support to eliminate I-69.
Thank you. Senator Dyke.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor, I think there's always good parts of a bill and bad parts of a bill, depending on which side you are. Now, the good side, I believe, of this bill, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is it makes sure that there's Indiana companies that get these contracts. I know it wasn't, but don't believe everything you read in the paper. Sorry, guys. But
he's radio.
That's a very important part of this bill, is Indiana companies, Indiana contractors get those jobs. We're bringing people in from out of state right now in northern Indiana to do jobs in this state, and everybody else is laid off. That does not make sense. Now, that's the good part of the bill. The other parts I don't know about, I'm not familiar with, but I did hear about those jobs in Indiana part of that bill. So I think it's very important that we put Hoosiers back to work, not bring people in from Michigan or Ohio or Illinois or Kentucky.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
I'll just be very brief. I think, Mr. Taylor, that this is nothing more than a bargaining chip. I think Representative Avery's right. And because, the Democrats want to have an economic stimulus package, and they would like to use part of the money from the surplus. Quite honestly, we really don't have a very big surplus when you look at the total revenues of the state. But I do think that this is a bargaining chip. I don't think anyone seriously, certainly I wouldn't be supporting a bill that's going to jeopardize I-69. I've been working on that piece of highway funding for 20 years, so I certainly want to see it continue to happen. And I just think it's a bargaining chip that probably won't even pass the House as it is, or if it does, it will certainly not see the light of day in the Senate as it is currently crafted.
Thank you. We are very, very brief.
You know, the thing that is so frustrating to me, and I'm sure that frustration is shared by my fellow legislators, is all the games that are played in the process. If we could go and do good legislation that takes care of people, we'd all be better off. We'd be far better served, and Hoosiers would be. And it's all the games involved in the process that makes it very frustrating and, quite honestly, disappointing.
Okay. But it is the only game in town. We're now moving to this side of the room. See somebody in the very back in the middle toward the aisleway? Yes. Microphone is on its way to you. Please state your name, very briefly your issue, and then we'll get into it.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Norick, and I'm here to talk to you about providing state funding for the 211 system. Your local 211 information referral service provides services to Vanderburgh, Warwick, Spencer, Posey, and Gibson County. And finding help can be a challenge for many residents in Indiana as they attempt to navigate a web of health and human service programs, often placing multiple calls to fulfill one need. The 211 Information Referral Specialists connect Hoosiers to services such as emergency food and shelter, counseling, assistance for the elderly, after-school programs, and much more. In 2008, the 211 centers in Indiana, there's now 16 of them, went into action when federally declared disasters hit our state across the state. And while 911 and emergency responders were dealing with rescues and evacuations, 211s connected affected families with sandbags, water, food, emergency shelter, as well as donors and volunteers. After initial flurry of attention, 211 continues to help families and communities recover through long-term recovery efforts. Before catching the attention of the media, Indiana's 211 centers were already documenting the economic crisis. 211 services document dramatic increases in callers' needs regarding food pantries, utility, housing, healthcare, and more. In 2008, 211 centers answered 383,388 calls in 1 year. This is a 39% increase over the calls we received in 2007. And your local center, which is through United Way 211, served over 19,000 callers last year. We are critical to services providing services to individuals, and locally, our center also acts as the information line for community programs such as the free volunteer income tax assistance sites and the City of Evansville's newest initiative, which is called Bank On. So I would just encourage you to help provide funding for the 211 system. Thank you.
Thank you. Responses from legislators, please. First is Representative Avery.
Are there cuts? Or are you asking? Or is this new money you're asking for?
Well,
you didn't go into that.
It's not new. 211 has been around
right.
since 2000, so it's not essentially a new program. But we're asking for funding for the next year to help fulfill our.
Is it in the budget though?
Not yet. That's why we're asking it to be in the
So
budget.
it was taken out of the recommendations then?
No, I don't think it was ever in the budget.
Okay, so it's a new program. I mean, for the state of Indiana, it would be new funding. Okay. Yeah, but it's been funded. But I know I've been to meetings where I got a copy of your big thick book. But I think it's a wonderful program. And how much are you asking for?
We are asking $9.5 million for the biennium.
Okay. Well, that's a problem. Yeah, as you can see, there are worthwhile wonderful programs that are being slashed and even eliminated, and it will be very difficult, I think, this year to get a new I had half a dozen bills that I didn't even introduce because they cost money, and so I think you're going to probably see new programs not on the agenda unless they're absolutely necessary, and like a new prison, of course, but anyhow. But I do appreciate your comments, and please, and I do have information. I think I've already received a packet from you all too, and I've already looked at it. And it's on my pile. Thanks.
Thank you. Other legislators? Senator Dyke.
I appreciate all the work you do there. It's a great program. I do have your big book. I gave it to my legislative assistant because it has all the contacts in our whole area, or the area you serve, when you have a problem. So that's great that, if people have problems, I call those numbers. So I appreciate that. I know every year since I've been up there, which is only 3 now, they've always talked about raising some way, finding funding for that in different areas, and it's never went through. But I know everybody's locally, all the volunteer organizations like United Way, who funds you and gives you money, and other organizations give you money, are strapped too. So it's going to be a tough year for you. I don't know which way to approach this. So, but I just want to tell you thank you for your service for that.
Thank you. Other legislators? Thank you. We'll move on to the next issue. We're back over on this side. Saw a hand right here in the middle, and third row back. Microphone is there. Please state your name and briefly your issue, and then we get into it.
My name's William Kitchens. I'm from Newburgh, Indiana, and I'm wondering, since the governor said that we had $1.3 billion surplus, that why we couldn't give everyone who works for the state of Indiana increase in wages, like 5.2%, like the Social Security gave us, and I believe it's best that we have this because the teachers needs a good increase too. We should do this. This be a stimulus package, and later on they could reimburse you. Obama and them could reimburse your budget, and we should think about this. This is important because people will spend this money, and our employees of the state don't get rich working, and they need this increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Responses from legislators? Okay, well, I saw Representative Avery first, then Senators Dyke and Becker.
I've historically supported increases in public employee wages because in every budget, although there have been several budget cycles, they didn't get them. In fact, we've actually appropriated money, and we've seen governors just take the money away and use for other purposes. And this governor and the previous governor, Senator Bai when he was a governor. However, this is probably not a year that anyone will get a pay raise, I'm afraid. It's just the 1.3 billion that we'll have at the end of this budget cycle. I think we can spend some of that, but I think we're probably going to be spending it for some of the programs that we've talked about today, like public radio, public TV, and a number of these important, the arts important programs that are being eliminated will be severely damaged by this budget. But I don't think we're going to probably see pay raises for public employees this year, even though it's probably due, since Indiana employees probably make less than most states, if not all the states. They're really underpaid and work hard, and I think it's long overdue. But I'm afraid we're not going to raise taxes, and to do that, because that debate's already occurred with the leadership of both parties. There's not going to be a tax increase this year, but it's important that we discuss these issues at times because it'll help perhaps in the future.
Thank you. Senator Dyke is next, then Senator Becker.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think state employees really need more money. There's no doubt about it. Now, this is what really upsets me, and I'm going to give you a little scenario, a little story here. If you all hang in there and don't fall asleep. Former Secretary Robe with FSSA is now with Economic Development. He moved from FSSA to Economic Development. They gave him a $20,000 a year increase. He's making $120,000 a year now. Right after he gave him a $20,000 a year increase, he cuts everybody or just freezes everybody else's wages. So that's a very big problem. FSSA, 3 years ago, they signed a contract. The governor signed a contract for $1.2 billion with an out-of-state company that Mitch Robe used to work for. And now, 2 weeks ago, they were supposed to solve all the FSSA problems. And it's created nothing but chaos. Now, 2 weeks ago, he signed a $6.8 million contract with a defense contractor to line out all the computer glitch problems. So we got problems. I don't understand. This money is being sent out of state to try to correct problems that really weren't major problems to begin with. And now he's cutting everybody else's pay, and we have other major problems. Now, that's $1.2 billion and $6.8 million. So we got problems there.
Thank you. Senator Becker. That's okay.
I think, let me try to get back to your question. State employees, I think they do deserve a pay raise, and teachers certainly do. I mean, everybody's expenses are going up. Everybody has these enormous heating bills, but I doubt that it's going to be possible this year, and teachers are really, it's a local decision with the school board as to whether or not teachers get a pay raise, but also the schools have to have the money in which to give it, and it's a matter of priorities too. So I am not optimistic that will happen. I wish it would. I think it's well deserving, but I'm not sure that it's going to happen. I am concerned about the IBM contract with the modernization. I think with some assistance we could make that system, the new system, work, but we do need to get the glitches out of it. We need more help at the local office and we need more help at our employment office as well. And because there are more people losing their jobs, and yet the governor 2 years ago, he centralized. He moved a lot of our local employment counselors and staff to Indianapolis, and he said, if you want a job, you have to go to Indianapolis. And that has created a lot of problems locally, and that is a problem we're going to have to deal with. The Unemployment Compensation Fund, which is now operating in a deficit, and the states had to borrow money from the federal government, but we're going to have to pay that back too. And yet it's at a time when we have more and more people needing that assistance from unemployment compensation, and we don't have adequate staff to fund that. So I think we're all in a world of hurt, although we are in better shape. I have to keep reminding myself that we're in better shape than California and some of the other states as well.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next issue. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Rican.
Thank you. Since Senator Becker brought up the one issue about centralization, I think that is a concern in all these programs and what has really happened. And that concerns me when money and personnel is being moved to Indianapolis as well. I believe it means the power and the control is, and I think that's happening. Not happened in IDEM. I think that's happening in all across the board where these good programs are serving people, and we need to be very careful about it.
Thank you. Now move on to the next issue. We're over on here again. I see the third row back in the light. Microphone's right there. Please state your name and
Pam
briefly your
Walker.
issue.
Okay, I'm going to try to sneak an issue in here, and if you don't allow it, then I've got a second one. The issue is about people having good furnaces and good insulation and good windows and stuff, and whether or not Indiana is doing as much as other government entities throughout the country as far as helping people on these issues, because ultimately to reduce our energy consumption as a whole, as a country, is a major goal and a major need if we're going to all survive. And so is there any, and the people that can least afford it are the people that, have the worst situations as far as old furnaces and leaky windows and all that stuff. So are we keeping up with other states on that, and is there anything that we could do to make it easier for people to renovate their homes? I know we have a lot of local efforts like Habitat and some church efforts and Front Door Pride that are really good things, but as a state, are we doing as much as we could?
Thank you. Responses from legislators. Representative Rican first.
Thank you. Of course, I really don't know the answer to that, and I'll look into it. But it's an excellent idea for stimulating the economy and working on the homes and making sure they're energy efficient, still providing jobs. It's a great idea.
Thank you. Other Representative Avery, then Senators Becker and Dyke.
There have been a number of programs over the years that have worked in this area. I know the Community Action Program, I believe, was involved with this several years ago. They had a weatherization project and to help low-income people weatherize their home, which then brought down the cost of energy. And I think we've also had tax incentives in the past for that, but I don't think we do anymore. And Indiana, we hear over and over again, the governor's always saying that we're much better than everybody else. But you know what? Our infrastructure is not better than anyone else. And I'm not just talking about bridges, roads, and things like buildings. We're talking about the infrastructure in this state, whether it be kindergarten programs where you have full-day kindergarten programs where you have teachers. That's an infrastructure. But if you lose it, well, you've lost those teachers. And to start it someday, we've got to start over from scratch. And our homes, the infrastructure is not of as quality as they should be, because Indiana does very little in that regard, and we should be doing a lot more, because that saves money and rather than in the long run. And it also puts people to work, as you correctly noted, and that's the kind of thing we ought to be looking at. And it's the kind of thing that the feds should be dealing with this year in that jobs incentives package, and to help create jobs throughout the country, especially the cold weather states, and bring down these energy bills that Fred talked about a while ago.
Thank you. Next is Senator Becker, then Senator Dyke.
I would encourage you to contact the Community Action Program of Evansville, because they do have a weatherization program, and it's still in effect. At least, because I just read an article, either Indianapolis Star or the Evansville Courier, and I always read my papers behind coming home. And there's also still energy assistance available for people that haven't signed up, for low-income families that haven't signed up. I mean, I was really surprised that they were still promoting it, because I would have thought, with the economy being what it is, that there wouldn't be any money left by this time. But I think it was in the Star or the Evansville Courier. So we do still have that program, and we have it at the state level, and it comes from the federal government. In fact, we passed a bill last year to remove the sales tax on that program so that more money could go for energy assistance for people throughout the state. So if there are those here, and if you know folks that need it, encourage them to contact Vectrum or the Community Action Program of Evansville.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We've probably got time for maybe one more issue. Been going along pretty good so far. We're back to this side. I see a hand up on the end over there in the brown. Microphone is on its way to you. When it gets to you, please state your name, very briefly your issue, and then we'll get into your issue.
My name is Gerald Nurnberg. I'm the Mars Township trustee, and my issue is that you want to consolidate the local government, but at the same time you're having trouble for all the other agencies consolidated. But I would just like to state, if you do away with the local government, I appeal the state needs to come down and take over our fire departments, because there's no way our county will be able to fund them, because we've already got the word out the volunteer fire department is going to do away with it, because they can't get no help now from the council now or the commissioners, because we can't even get ambulance service out in Mars Township, and we service over 3,000 households, and that is a problem we're going to face when you get rid of your local trustees and everybody else. You have trouble now with the state, with the family services and the unemployment. So I'm just saying, please do not do away with us this year. And I'd like to ask one question. On the tax bill in 2008 on type 2 property, on the property, how much is it over the 2% in Evansville right now in your city counts, in your townships? Does anybody know that?
Well, if you're finished, we'll get
okay,
responses.
I'm done.
Thank you. Responses from legislators, please. Senator Dyke.
I don't know the answer to that. I do have some information. I could probably look that up, Gerald, but I don't know. It's probably not a whole lot. It's probably not a whole lot.
What percent is it over?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that question right now.
People should know if you're going to set these caps in then. You should know that right now. Go to each different counties and know.
Well, we have that information. Now, let me say this. I will say Gerald is my assessor and trustee. Well, I'm sorry, you're my trustee now in my township. So Gerald does a great job and is very knowledgeable. And he keeps me honest on all these issues. I don't agree with the tax caps. First of all, you mentioned tax caps. I don't agree with the tax caps. It's very unfair. I'm surprised nobody else brought it up. You know, we talk about 1%, 2%, and 3% caps. I think we need to give it some time to see what happens with that. But the Constitution says fair and equitable taxation, and I don't think it's fair and equitable to anybody when it's 1%, 2%, and 3%. I like to see if we're going to cap it, let's make one grade of capping and go on with it. Local government reform, Gerald, I'm against local government reform. Where some areas it might work, maybe it'll work in Vandenberg County with consolidation. Where the bigger cities are, it might work. I don't know. From the rural area I'm from, it wouldn't work. You lose representation, I believe. One size does not fit all. Efficiency does not mean money savings. If you look across the whole United States, any place that consolidated or reformed government, it costs more money. So I'm against that. And we're looking this year to save people money and cut funds from different things. We shouldn't look for something that's going to increase and cost more. So I'm against that totally. I believe those all should be local decisions, nothing mandated from the state. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Representative Rican is next.
Well, Senator Dyke really spoke a lot of what I do believe, and I really don't look favorably at doing away with the trustees. And I would say it was the League of Women Voters, I believe, that had that excellent informational session with Chief Justice Shepard and a couple other folks. Isn't that correct? It was the League of Women Voters, wasn't it? Yeah. And I remember a comment that the Chief Justice said, and I've asked him about if I understood this correctly, and he does believe that this was kind of an outline. This was something to start the discussion, and we really do need to look at the individual counties because, as Senator Dyke said, they are different. Vandenberg is not Warwick, is not Posey, and I think what may work here would not work in the others. So there's a long way before I think there's going to be a vote on that.
Thank you. Other responses? Representative Avery.
I don't think this is the year that's going to happen either. And I'm not sure this is the year we should be tackling this issue. I think there's some of the bill, I'm thinking 2 years ago, had 27 recommendations, and they added some more this year. We're dealing with the judicial branch. But the governor only recommended 20 of those 27. I got a letter the other day asking me to vote for all 27 recommendations and chastised me for not doing so or not agreeing to do so. I can support some of the recommendations, and I do think reform of local government's a good idea. However, I don't support all the programs, and I'm not sure that there's a system in place right now to take over the responsibilities of township government, even though I personally think township government's an anachronism. But you got to have a system to replace it, and that doesn't exist right now. And I'm not sure. I certainly don't want to give it to the state because they'd immediately privatize it to some of the friends. But and a county government, I'm not sure that that's an appropriate place to put it either. So we only have one system in place, and you're quite correct. You don't just do poor relief; you also do volunteer fire departments and cemeteries. And we have one township in Vandenberg County that even has a park. So I don't necessarily think that the recommendations are appropriate until they come up with a plan that actually works. In regard to township government, I'm not sure I would support it at this point. In fact, I'm pretty sure I won't support what is proposed, but if something comes up that would improve the system, I could support that, because I do think we ought to constantly be reforming the process and improving the process, and I hope to work toward that goal.
Thank you. Representative Crouch.
And I agree with Representative Avery. We're all for more cost-effective, efficient government, and I think we need to look at ways to make government more cost-effective and efficient. And these particular proposals are proposals, and they need to be studied, and we need to also recognize that one size does not fit all, and every county is unique and their needs are different, and we need to look at how to best address them.
Thank you. And last comment, Senator Becker.
I would just say that, we passed a bill 2 or 3 years ago, House Bill 1362, which really gave local government the option of consolidating wherever they wanted to, and it hasn't occurred. I'm not sure it's occurred anywhere in the state, so I'm not sure. Senator Dodd corrected me; he said one place, but they already have that option, and I just don't think that one size fits all. And the one thing I want to say about the Kernan-Shepard report, unfortunately, they did not do any cost analysis. There is no cost analysis to tell us if you do this recommendation, it saves or it costs more. There is nothing in that looked at cost analysis, and I think that's a big flaw in that process.
Okay, thank you. We are out of time. I'd like to remind you to please police your area. Just pick up whatever trash and cups that you have and take them to your right. I have a place for that so we can get squared away.
I got one comment.
Very quickly.
I have one comment. Now, these numbers aren't good in the long run, but Chief Justice had a State of the Judiciary the other day, and he made a comment that for the first time ever, we have more foreclosure filings in the state of Indiana than divorce filings. Tells you what kind of shape we're in.
Thank you. If you'd like to still make a donation, you can do that to cover the cost of donuts and things, so that would be fine. Last reminder is that our next event is in this same location, February 21st. Thank you.